everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to look at what is called sideways market trend. So this sideways market trend is sometimes nerve-wracking. We don't know where the market is moving. Is it to the up? Is it to the down? So money is kind of stuck. It's moving just in the boundary. So we are kind of very uncertain during this period. So we're going to study in this particular video how to actually dissect this particular trend and to know early signs whether it's going to move up or down. So if it's going to move up, probably it's going to create uptrend where the big money can be created. When it's moving downward, you can actually try to kind of precaution yourself and take the money away and run away early before the others start to run. So this is exactly what we're going to cover in this particular video. Stay tuned. Guys, before we continue, can you help me to subscribe this channel so that videos that I'm posting will come direct to your screen and you can learn a lot of information from my videos, and this is going to really help you in your trading activities. So also do like and give comments for my video and give your opinion, what you are thinking. Do you agree or disagree with what I'm saying, so we can learn together. Let's start. Okay, so now we will look at the arts technique. What does the arts technique define sideways trend? So basically there are two kinds of sideways trends. One is actually a triangle that is contracting, one is actually an expanding. So it basically may look something like this. This is a contracting triangle and that's the expanding triangle. So basically you'll see the price moves in this contracting triangle, and the other one is actually price moves outward to this expanding triangle. So this is basically what the two kinds of what you call moves that is specified in the arts technique. And basically you will see that the power the power is actually pulling on each side, the top side, the supply and the demand in these two sides pulling in a strong force, equally strong force. That's why it's actually moving in that direction. So that's why the power basically the arts technique defines that a sideway happens due to equal. Of course you might have something like this as well. I don't deny that this is going to be a sideway. You'll see that the power is actually there's a force. The supply power and the demand power is actually equal in force. So that's why you see them moving in that sideway move. Okay, so but when you look thoroughly at these sideway moves, you will see that at times one of these forces may actually give up, and the other force, let's say the upper force, the upper power force actually overtake the down pull, and that's where you see that it starts to move toward uptrend. And likewise, if you see that the down power is actually pulling more than the upper power, the power to move upwards, then you see that the share price will actually move toward the downside. Okay, that's where you have the down pulling. So it's actually who wins at the end of the day in these pulling games. Okay, so now what we will look at, we will look at some scenarios, and we will look at how to identify who's going to be in this particular race of powers between these two sides, the supply and the demand side. Okay, so now I'm going to discuss one scenario. So let's say we have a price moving like this. Okay, so I hope this diagram is good enough for me to explain. So in this diagram, we can analyze the downtrend that is in this. Actually, again, we need two loops. So this is the high, this is the low, and then that's the lower high. So that creates one loop, right? That creates one loop. And then the lower high followed by a higher low, and then and then we have a lower high again here. That this part creates another loop. Okay, so we need two loops to do this analysis. Okay, so this down move is due to, if you have watched my previous videos, you would know that this down move is due to a supply that is existing in the market. Then we will see that there is an upward move. Why we have this upward move is again due to a demand. So that means there was some supply pulling it down the price, because it's natural, right? Economically, when there's more supply in the market, the price tends to go down. Okay, so when the supply is more, the price is going down, and finally people realize that they like this particular share, then they start to buy this share, so it creates some sort of demand. So there's more demand than the available shares, then you see that the price keeps moving up. So that's why the green arrow that is pointing up is due to demand. And after that, then somewhat they realize that, okay, I think the price is going enough high, I'm going to sell it. So therefore it's going to create a supply again. So you get a supply scenario here again. And then after that, again, someone realizes, no, it's the dynamic of the market. Then they see that they want to buy this particular share, so the price is moved up, and that creates demand, right? So this is actually the supply and demand. So now we want to see the forces of the supply and the forces of demand. Who is going to win this race? Or it could be like one winning, the demand side could be winning. So if the demand side is winning, then the price, there's a tendency of the price moving upward. So it may create a uptrend. Then if the supply side is actually heavier, I mean it's winning, then you'll see that it's going to go downward. So the price is going to fall down, right? In a downward pattern. But if this supply and demand is kind of equal, then it's going to continue to move in that sideways pattern until one of that power supply or the demand power going to win the race. Okay, so that's basically the philosophy that we're talking about here. Now let's try to analyze what is the supply force and what's the demand force that we have here. Okay, so probably I'll try to use blue color to do that. Okay, so see the down arrow, maybe I highlight again. This down arrow is actually saying that it is price is moving downward, and then that upward is actually saying that the price is moving upward, right? So this part, right? Now I'm going to see how far the demand is. So if you try to draw, if you try to see how far it retraces, it means like, yeah, we know that the price went down and then the price went up. We want to measure, you can use a Fibonacci tool to measure how much the price has gone up from the fall of the previous. How much did the price went up? So now let's say we assume that at this juncture it went up by 70%. Okay, it managed to recover back 70% of the fall, of the previous fall. Now then we look at the second, we're going to look at the second cycle. So this is the first cycle, that's the second cycle. So we're going to look at the second cycle. So that's a fall that we have there, followed by a demand that is coming thereafter, this part. Now again we're going to measure what is the level of the demand. We're going to measure that level of demand. So we can see that it's almost reaching 100%. So we might say that the demand is like 95%. Let's assume that that is the number. Let me put the 5 properly. So that's the 95%. Now what we saw here, demand. So I put D as noting demand. So the demand is actually moving from 70% to 95%. So naturally, what does it tell us? When the demand is getting stronger, from 70% now becoming 95%, there's more people wanting this particular share. So that's why we see from the previous cycle to the recent cycle, there's a demand which is growing up. So that basically tells us naturally there is a power to move up. So that means there's a tendency for the price to move up. So we will conclude here that God power to move up. Okay, up from the previous high. Okay, up higher than the previous high. Okay, so apology for the writing, bad writing. Hopefully you can read up. So got power to move up higher than the previous high. Okay, now next, so that is one conclusion we can make, right? So that means we have an upward move power now. Now we want to see the downward move power. So when we got to again find 2 cycles to do this analysis. So what is the cycle? We got to find Okay, let's make an assumption that the price already make a turn here. Okay, so somewhat we need a turn here in order to denote that this is one point of our analysis. This is going to be our higher low. So this is going to be our higher low. Let's assume that the price has already turned up here, is moving in the up direction. Make that assumption. Okay, so now when I want to analyze the supply side, I would need okay, so that's the tough part here. Okay, so I will need the I'll take so I will take this particular low and then that particular high and that particular higher low, and I'll try to erase this is the two cycles I created for the previous analysis, which is the upward move power. Now I want to analyze the downward move power, so I need to change my cycle. So I'm going to make this is my first cycle, that's my first cycle. So the low followed by the high followed by the low again is going to create one cycle. That's the first cycle. So we got to analyze the two recent cycles. So we are at this junction, right? So the two cycles, the nearest one is, that's the first nearest one. The second nearest, or the rather the most nearest, is this particular low and that particular high, and this particular low is going to create another cycle here. So that is cycle number 2. Okay. So we have identified two cycle, and we are at right now we are at this part. We are right now here. We want to make a view. Let me put it as an arrow. We are right now here, and we want to, that doesn't look like an arrow. Okay, let me put up here. So let me put it up here. We are right now here. Now we want to determine what is the likelihood of the market now. Is it going to move further up? Is it going to break the previous high? Is it going to break the previous low to go downward? So that is the subject to discuss now. So now we're going to look at the supply. We're going to analyze how strong is the supply, because the stronger the supply is, then there's a tendency to move further low. So now, so this was the price move. Maybe I use the brown color itself. This is the price move upward we saw just now. This is the price move upward. Then after the price move down, we want to see how far did it move down. So that is roughly like 80%. We can say it moved like 80% down. Alright. Then the next one, in the next cycle, we saw that this is the price moving up. And then there's a price moving down here. But it only moved down by, say, for example, 30%. Okay, moved down by 30%. So in the first cycle, we saw that there's a stronger supply. So the price moved up and then went down by 80%. So a lot of people are not very confident, so they were selling that back the shares. But then in the second cycle, the price moved up. Then we found suddenly that there are only very few of us want to sell the share, 30% of them. So now we see at the supply side, the supply actually from 80% decreased to become 30%. So what does that tell us? It does not have any power to move down. Okay, no power to move down. I would say, to be more precise, I would say no power to move down lower than previous low. Okay, I hope you can read my writing. I know that it's quite terrible, but I'm going to read back to you. We're going to say that there's no power to move down lower than the previous low. Okay. Okay. So I mean, by taking these two conclusions, by taking this first conclusion and taking that second conclusion, the first conclusion says that there's a power to move up. right? So the first conclusion says there's a power to move up. The second conclusion says there's no power to move down. So that means if your chart is like this, then we don't have an equal balance of the supply and demand. In fact, the demand is stronger than the supply right now. So there's a high tendency that this particular move upward trajectory move is going to move higher than the previous high here. This is the previous high here, so it's going to move higher. So if it did move higher than the previous high, then what will it basically result into? It is going to result into an uptrend, because you're going to have this part as a low, and then you're going to have this part as your high. Okay, that's a bit difficult to draw, so I put it here, overlap it. I mean, it's difficult to read, right? Okay, so what we will see is we're going to have this side as our low, and that side as our high, and then that side as our higher low, and then since we say that it's going to breach higher than the previous high, maybe end up somewhere here, then we will end up to have a higher high. Okay, so the moment we have a higher high and a higher low, we know that it is creating a uptrend. See, from a sideways market, when the balance is the balance of power is no longer in balance, the upward trajectory is more than the downward trajectory, it is going to create that upward balance, upward move, upward trajectory, or upward trend. And if you are smart enough, you were to invest somewhere here, you get that much of profit to gain. You got that much of profit to gain. So that is kind of it's kind of early warning, right? It's kind of early warning for us to do our positioning, anticipating that the market is going to buy. It is actually an academic, or rather educated judgment. So we are not gambling here. We are actually doing educated judgment here, using the supply and demand to position ourselves such that we will take advantage when the market actually moves in that particular direction. But this is all again about probability. So there's a high probability it's going to be in that direction. So, but of course, there might be that 1% where you may not get that you may not get that expectation. So that is the risk that we all have to take when we are in the stock market. Okay, so we base ourselves on the educated judgment, but sometimes you see some other forces of the nature actually make us to kind of realize some sort of risk, and therefore we're going to lose, and that is out of our control, right? So we will take the educated judgment. In the previous video, we saw that in the previous discussion, we look at the imbalance of power, where the upper power actually win, or rather won, and the price tend to move upward, right? But this time we're going to look at the opposite side of it, where in the balance of the power, the upper power lose and the down power actually win. Okay, so let's try to again do the same sort of analysis, but just that it's upside down. So here we have a downturn. That's a downturn. So you have a high, that's a low, and then you're gonna up, it's a moving up, so that is the lower high, and then again it's moving down again, so that's creating supply. So that's a supply, that's a supply again, and then it's moving up again, right? And then that's the demand. This is again demand, is creating a lower high again, and then after that a supply comes in again. Okay, so that is the, I would say, well, this is higher low, this is also higher low. Okay, higher low. Okay, so we have annotated our chart rather. Now with the understanding of the supply and demand that we have in this particular chart, next we're going to analyze the power that is inherent in it. So let's look at the power inherent in it. So the supply, so this is the supply part. So the supply part is coming in here. So that is supply, downward move supply, and then after that we have a upper move demand. Okay, we have upper move demand, right? So we will see how far it retraces. How much demand did we have? Well, we can estimate that to be 70% demand, 70%. So this is a rough estimate. Then after that, we have that supply coming in again, right? And then the demand coming in again, and then that demand is only, we can say it's like 30% or rather 40%. Okay, so on the demand side, okay, this time I'm going to use a keyboard to type. I know my writing is too bad, so I will try to use typing so that it's much more visible or rather. So in terms of demand, what we have is we have a 70% demand moving toward 40%, right? We have 70% demand moving to 40%, and the conclusion is, so the conclusion that we can make is, so the demand is decreasing, right? So when the demand is decreasing, there is no power to move up. Can we say like that? So there is no power to move up. Okay, so it's not showing up here. To move up, there's no power to move up beyond the previous high. Okay, there's no power to move up beyond the previous high. So because the demand is decreasing, so the price can't move further up, right? So that's the first conclusion I will say. Oops, where did it go? Okay, so now we're going to make a conclusion. Okay, we will make a conclusion. Now this time I'm going to type it out. Okay, so in terms of demand, we have 70% demand now reducing to become 40%, right? And then next thing is the conclusion. The conclusion we can make is there is no power to move higher than the previous high. Okay, do you agree with that? So if you don't agree, you probably want to put some comment in the video. Maybe I can have a look into it. So this is what I am trying to conclude. There's no power to move up. Now we're going to look at on the supply side now. So if you were to look at the supply side, so to know the supply side, we need to have again, this is a supply side, right? So I'll use the red mark. That's the supply side. So again, we need to have two loops. So that is one loop. Okay, the low, the high, and the low will create one loop, and the low and the high and that low will create another loop. Okay, so this is what we did in the previous diagram as well. So we got to identify the loop first before we do our analysis. I didn't do that for the uptrend just now, the power up move analysis, but I hope you can follow me. Okay, now let's try to look into that power that we have here. Okay, so we have that move which is moving upward here. So this is the demand, and after that we have the supply move that is moving downward here. So this is the supply. Now we notice that the supply is how much? So when the price moved and then it came back by how much? It retraces by how much? Well, it retraces quite heavily here. I would say it's almost 80%. I would say. Okay, it retraces almost 80% down here. Okay, maybe I'll put it 70%, or rather 75%, just to make my analysis easier. Okay, instead of putting 80, I'm putting 75%, so that it helps in my next analysis. Okay, so now we see that the price moves up here in the next in the next cycle, and then the price moves down again, but this time it moves quite terribly down. So you can see that it's almost touching the 100% retracement. So we will say this is 90%. Okay, we'll say this is 90%. So now if I were to take my note again, I'm going to make a note. Okay, just give me a minute. Okay, so I'm going to type my note here. So in terms of supply, what I have is 75% supply becoming 90% supply. And what I can conclusion here is, well, because there is more supply, then there's a tendency of there's a power to move down. Okay, there is power to move down below the previous low. Okay, so I can actually conclude in that manner. There is power to move down below the previous low. So if you're kind of not agreeing or you still have some problem, you may comment, and then I'll actually look into it, and then probably I'll give some reply to you. Okay, so now we have two conclusions. So we have analyzed both the demand side and the supply side. On the demand side, we said that there is no power to, okay, let me change, there is no power to move higher. Okay, but then we found out in the second conclusion there is a power to move down. So there is no power to move up. There is no power to move up, but there is a power to move down. So now what basically that means is, so this is the lowest low we have right now. This is the lowest low we have right now. Okay, the recent low, rather would say. So that means this price, even though it moved up, okay, there is a tendency that is going to go down like this. Okay, there is a tendency for it to move down. There is a tendency for it to move down because our analysis show that there is no power to move upward, but rather, I mean, there is no power to go beyond the previous high, but there is more power to go below the previous low. Okay, so if it did indeed go below the previous low, we will immediately notice a downward trend. Okay, why I say so is because this will act as your high. This point will act as your high. This point will act as your low, and that point will act as a lower high, and maybe somewhere here you're gonna have some sort of lower low. So the moment we have lower high followed by lower low, that actually indicates the chart is already in a downtrend. So now how does it imply in terms of your investment? So in terms of investment, right now, if you're right now here, you can due to the analysis that we have done, you can already make a conclusion that I'm going to sell before it gets really terrible. I'm going to sell my shares before it gets really terrible, right? So that means it's kind of risk management we are doing. So before, we know things have gone down quite much. If you compare to this high, at this point, definitely things have gone quite a lot in fact. Okay, so I don't want to risk any more money. I would rather take out the money and put it in some other investment that probably will give a better return. Maybe I've already identified a better investment that probably will give a better return. So I would rather like to cash out from here, even though the cashing out here is probably at a loss. I will still cash out, and then I'll try to suffer that minimum loss, and then try to invest in another share that actually it's more promising, right? So that is actually going to give you a better risk reward ratio in terms of your whole portfolio investment portfolio. So I think that's all I have for now. If you have any more questions, you probably can. If you have any questions, probably you can actually give comment to my video, and then I will have a look into it and I try to reply to it. And that's it from me. If you like this particular video, you learn something from this particular video, and you like to have me producing more video of this nature, educating you on this analyzing the charts. Okay, So you can subscribe this channel and also leave a comment and also like and share to your friends so that it motivates me to put up more video as well. Thank you very much for now. Have a nice day.